So, last week you had Guy's 3 sermons all put together into one, didn't you? So I think you had a 40-minute marathon last week with Guy, beautifully setting the scene for our look at wisdom. And don't worry, I'm not going to repeat the performance. My 3 sermons are actually over 3 weeks, so you're okay. But wisdom, what's known in the Jewish Bible as the writings, comprise things like Proverbs and Psalms usually, books like Judges and Job, those kinds of, and Jonah, those kinds of things, which are telling us something important about God's world. And in particular, they were telling the Jewish people something important, not simply about their history, but about the meaning of that history. And some of them writings don't even come from an ostensibly Jewish tradition at all. They're actually from outside of that tradition. And as Guy has said last week, there were many things that were much wider in the ancient Near East, in the wisdom tradition. Lots of these collections, lots of these ways of looking at the world. But you've got to think that unlike books like Exodus, Deuteronomy, which are the law, are telling you this is how you should live, wisdom is very different. It's not moralising. It's looking at the world and saying, this is how things work. This is how to be wise in God's creation. There's a lovely little quote from Walter Brueggemann, which I've written down somewhere, to the effect of, wisdom writers are looking at the world with a wide-eyed prophetic gaze. And I love that, the wide-eyed prophetic gaze. Not moralising, but seeing how the world is. And you could pick out almost any bit of Proverbs and loads of other bits, but the bit that I thought we might read, that Rose is going to read to us, is Proverbs 11 that you've got on your sheet, that just brings together some of the ideas that I'm going to briefly draw to your attention today. Rose, would you like to read Proverbs?
A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but an accurate weight is his delight. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but wisdom is with the humble. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. The righteousness of the blameless keeps their ways straight, but the wicked fall by their own wickedness. The righteousness of the upright saves them, but the treacherous are taken captive by their schemes. When the wicked die, their hope perishes, and the expectation of the godless comes to nothing. The righteous are delivered from trouble, and the wicked get into it instead. With their mouths, the godless would destroy their neighbours, but by knowledge, the righteous are delivered. When it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices, and when the wicked perish, there is jubilation. By the blessing of the upright, a city is exalted, but it is overthrown by the mouth of the wicked.
Thanks, Rose. So wisdom focuses on the material reality of the world around us, creation and the ways in which we live in community. And this is not the theology of a nation state. This is not, isn't Israel great and the land belongs to us? This is outside of, thinking beyond or before, perhaps, nation states, before any kind of particular focus for God's activity is with us. Actually, God's activity is throughout creation, throughout the human interactions that we see around us. And the contrast is, as I said, to law, which says this is the way you should live when you enter the land. It's also in contrast to redemption theologies, which see the world as irretrievably flawed, from which we must be saved. There is no hint of the need for rescue in the wisdom writings. This is not what Proverbs is about, for instance. We can pick out different themes, but under it all runs this idea that there is no need for mending creation. Creation is willed by God, and yes, there are flaws in it, but if we live wisely, then we are part of the orderliness of creation. In Proverbs 10, I'll quote a few bits of Proverbs simply because I couldn't have them all as readings, there's too many of them. The fear of the Lord, fear being more like awe, but fear, understanding, knowledge of God, prolongs life, but the years of the wicked will be short. Life is ordered and sustained by our Creator God. And think of all those passages in the Psalms, you know, all the wild animals are waiting on you for their food. The land is waiting for the rain in due season. The whole of creation is ordered and sustained by God. And a well-ordered life, a God-oriented life, is the wisdom. That's the wise life, the righteous life, the upright life. It's not about the moral life, if you like. It's not about keeping the rules, being righteous. It's about living in the way that God intended. And then you flourish. And human communities flourish and all creation flourishes. And the opposite of that is wickedness. It's a disregard of God's rule, if you like. And it's a preoccupation with self. Because there are God-ordained givens for the wisdom writers that can't be circumvented or manipulated. So the social reality of the bit we read of Proverbs 11, a false balance is abomination to the Lord, but actually it undermines society. If you cannot trust the merchants, if you cannot trust the people who are buying and selling, and after all that is the great kind of genius of cities really in many ways, you know, actually society starts to fall apart. If the advertisers lie to us, shock horror, they lie. What products do we trust? That is foolishness or wickedness in the wisdom writers. The upright, the wise, are those who contribute to public, well-ordered life. The life not only of themselves, but also of the city, the human community. And there's lots of things throughout Proverbs you'll notice that about, you know, a wise person can keep their counsel, and the foolish person, the wicked person, is the one who slanders, the one who lies. Just look at some of the political campaigns that we have. I mean, I know I'm not a Londoner, but the campaign that was run there was so... The things they were saying about Sadiq Khan was just lunatic. No wonder he won. I mean, thank goodness. People could see through this. Oh, the man's an extremist. I mean, he's brown, you mean. Sorry. So, life is ordered for the wisdom writers, and there are givens. And if you do the wrong thing, actually the whole of society is undermined. And there are limits also to what is ethical. We see it particularly, we see it in lots of places in the Psalms, but also in Jeremiah. There's a lovely passage in Jeremiah where Jeremiah, as a wide-eyed prophet, talks about God setting limits for the sea being a kind of byword for chaos for the Israelite people. I placed the sand as a boundary for the sea, says God, a perpetual barrier that it cannot pass. The waves toss, but they cannot prevail. And then he goes on, Jeremiah links that immediately. You know, scoundrels are found among my people. They take over the goods of others. Like fowlers, they set a trap to catch human beings. Like a cage full of birds, their houses are full of treachery. Therefore they have become great and rich. They have grown fat and sleek. They know no limits to their deeds of wickedness. For the wisdom writers, it is about living within limits, not seeing these as restrictions, but by seeing these as actually the wise course of actions, because we have choice. We are creatures within this creation, and we have the freedom to make choices. We can use substandard weights, or we can use the right ones. We can speak badly of our neighbours, or we can speak well of them or keep silent. We have those choices. Because for every choice, given that freedom, even within those limits, there are consequences. And this is the insight that the wisdom writers have. That every act of freedom carries an inescapable future. No amount of money or power or cunning can avoid the linkage. In Proverbs, riches do not profit in the day of wrath. Righteousness delivers from death. Wisdom, we might say, is about escaping the flames in, Fort McMurray that's being consumed by wildfires. But greater wisdom would have been actually to limit your housing in dangerous areas, not building on floodplains in a country like Britain where, guess what, it rains and rivers flood. The wisdom is inextricably linked to the outcome of your actions. It follows, therefore, from this freedom, from these limits, from this sense that all acts have consequences, that freedom, that choice has responsibilities. Any act, any choice brings futures which we have to accept, mainly because we have very little choice. If we use up all the water, there will not be sufficient water. If we pollute the soil, our crops will fail. And this is what the wisdom writers are telling us. The great temptations which the wisdom writers recognise are not about the things we think of as temptations. They're not about, other writers will talk about, running away from God, adultery, all these other things. That's not the great temptation that wisdom writers see. But it is thinking that we are unencumbered by consequences. It's about thinking we have free autonomy. And the wisdom writers are saying, you don't. Their preferred term for this thought that actually we can do what we want without responsibility is foolishness. Actions that defy creation and damage community. In Proverbs 12 we read, "Fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to advice. Whoever speaks the truth gives honest evidence, but a false witness speaks deceitfully. Rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." Even in the words we say, as so many of us know through saying some rash words and thinking of, speaking without thinking, and I am the first one to do that, we realise that there are consequences. And how many times have I replayed in my mind, I wish I hadn't said that, or just replayed the conversation, only I'd done that differently. This theology has no sectarian language. It says nothing about sexuality or race, and it's got no reference to the next world, and it's got no appeal to miracle or to rescue, no demands other than the faithful, let's get this right, the daily enactment of a faithful life. That is what we are called to do by the wisdom writers. Day by day, we are in a world in which creatureliness, being part of creation, is to be practiced. All of creation is coherent. The present and the future are held together by acts and consequences. The rich and the poor are held together in a community. We are all members one of another. All creation is deeply interrelated. And it has a message for the churches too. I think we can't just therefore say, oh, well, we'll just concentrate on, doing social justice things and ignore the environment. We can't just, work for political change here and ignore Palestine, for instance, ignore justice elsewhere. We are interconnected, and we are especially connected with what we think of as creation, which is the out there, but actually we're all part. We are creatures within creation. We are all creatures with all the other creatures before God. Every human decision has an ethical dimension for the wisdom writers. But make no mistake, they are quite conservative with a small c in their thinking. They are not seeking social change. I'm sure they would accept slavery and women have their place and, you beat your children if they do the wrong thing. So, we would not recognise all that they say as being a way we want to live. But I think it's a central tenet that actually we are part of creation. We are an inescapable part of this totally interrelated creation in which, if we live day by day within this framework of the givens of God's creation, of the deeds and consequences and the responsibilities that we have, then we are the wise and we create community. And to do otherwise breaks it. So let's have a little time, a short time, of just discussing together. You have some questions on your sheet. Just get into 3s and 4s and think, what is the foolishness that you see today in the wisdom writers' terms? What is their foolishness? What ignores creatureliness and destroys community in our churches, our cities, our states? And how might we, as the St. Brides, the community of people, be wise? Over to you.